All right, quick mic check. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and bust this open real quick since this is release day for Tekken 8, and I probably should have put this out way earlier, but I wanted to talk about my worries about Tekken and the narrative and sort of tempers people's expectations, either going through the story today within the next couple days, slash going forward, not everybody getting it necessarily on release day. But a little bit background around me. I'm 35 years old, so I've literally grown up with Tekken. So this is gonna be my worries, comments, and sort of a little recap, getting us to where we're at now as to why Tekken 8 Tekken 8 has a very weak premise, but I don't want to spoil too much about my greater point. Let's start it off. So Tekken, a lot of people know the lore video has been everywhere. You've been able to play the game. I'm not gonna say I'm the only person on the world. A lot of people have been with this franchise from the gate, but the very strong premise of a game, right? Our main character Kazuya is thrown from a cliff when he's a kid by his dad. He's abused and tormented by the guy, and his dad ends up throwing this tournament. It's time for him to get his. He pulls up, runs the fade with Pops, does the same thing he did to him, which is throw him off of a cliff. And throughout the whole process, we come to the conclusion at the end of it that, hey, while we got to see Heihachi as a bad guy, that's his dad. So good character development sort of dictated that he was raised by a bad person. He's not the best person himself. So we get to Tekken 2, we find out that not only was he not the best person himself, but he's got the literal devil up in him. And that's how he managed to beat him. So they flipped the whole thing on its head. And we see here by the promotion materials that the bad guy from the last game, they're sort of presenting it to us that he's the good guy, because this guy isn't a good guy. And he got a whole bunch of power. He got a whole bunch, he got everything that his dad had. And he's been out there acting devilishly with it. So he kind of needs to be stopped. So by proxy of him not being the bad guy, or the bad, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing, really twisted morality, our abusive father is now kind of our antagonist or our protagonist, and the victim has become an antagonist himself. So it's a very interesting and compelling premise. Now, in the process of this whole spiel, Heihachi does eventually get the better of him, throws him into a volcano, ends it for good, return to the old status quo, except for without Kazuya being tortured and all that other good stuff. It's not about Kazuya being a tormented kid anymore. So we fast forward 20 years almost, and Kazuya had a kid, and now we're sort of picking up where we left off with the Kazuya story thread. So we go through, Heihachi's throwing a tournament because he's got his own. He's up to no good again. It finds out, we're kind of in the dark because we're a new generation, and we're seeing it through Jin's lens. Jin, he's a kid. His mom died. That's what brought him to Heihachi to begin with. And Jin, he don't know what's going on. And the audience, we don't really know what's going on too, because it's been 20 years past since Heihachi turned over a new leaf. He's being pretty chill with his grandson. He's not like an abusive piece of garbage like he was with his son. Why is the tournament being thrown in this, that, and the third? And we find out, he's trying to get this ogre and this devil gene stuff from Jin, and he's up to no good like he typically is. and Jin ends up taking a bullet to the dome, getting betrayed by Heihachi, and it awakens the devil within him. He takes off, right? So, a super compelling premise though is that we're from here. We have a good deal of backstory and exposition, and then here in Tekken 3, it's a new generation, so we're in the dark. We don't know what's going on. It's a different kind of vibe, right? Then we go over here to 4, and man, oh man, it hits us with probably the best. The death and the return of Superman wasn't this hype, right? When Kazuya came back to life, it's like, whoa. It was a big whoa factor. So now it's kind of like you're following that same, like, kind of in the dark, the mystery. We're kind of in the mystery premise, right? And it's very compelling, right? Because we're like, what's Kazuya doing here? How is he back? Jin's over here. He disappeared after the end of this one. What happened to him? Like, Heihachi, of course, he's probably not up to no good, but we don't know what's going on. So there's a lot of mystery going on here, and we're trying to find out what's happening. So this is kind of like the perfect like three ended on, like, kind of, it ended on the perfect cliffhanger, and then where this picked up was like the perfect way to pick that up, is that, like, there's a lot of mystery that happened between that cliffhanger and here, and we need to see what's going on. We need to see exactly what's going on. So, and this is where we started getting the prologue and epilogue kind of system that we had in 4 and in 5 as well. So going on to 5, okay, 5 picks up right where this ended, which again was kind of a similar cliffhanger. So Jin, they had a 3-way melee at the end. Heihachi was trying to get Jin, or Heihachi ended up beating Kazuya in the finals, bringing him to see Jin anyway. He tried to get Kazuya and Jin into it so that way he could extract the devil gene up out of them guys, and it turned into a 3-way fight. Jin ended up getting the upper hand, flying off, and then this picks up right where that ended. Right, and then through the course of this game, we run into Jinpachi, which turned out to be the only person who's alive on this planet that was ever nice to Kazuya. Right, because Jin's got Xiao Yu. Jin had his mom for most of his life. Jin had people being nice to him. Heihachi's got kids all over the place, so we're gonna get to that here in a second. But Heihachi doesn't have, like, the just pure abuse that Kazuya suffered. Kazuya, like, literally only person in life who's alive that was ever nice to him is Jinpachi. So Jinpachi coming back, and you kind of seeing that through the course of the story, and then Jin ended up killing him. You're like, man, you end up, because regardless of how messed up Kazuya's been, the sympathy is going to always be there. The sympathy is always going to be there because this man throughout his entire life has been abused by his dad. And he's been caught up in the scheme, and he's been wanting one thing, and that's revenge on him. Okay, and despite them going back and forth, him getting his lick the one time, taking L's the rest of the times to him, right? Despite that, Heihachi, you understand why he had to come back in Tekken 2 and beat him, because he was off the rails, but you just want Kazuya to get his. So the fact that his son turns around and kills him, it's that's no good. But the whole premise, the way this was set up, was like, the intro, Heihachi's dead. It's been like 20 years now since this game came out. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. Heihachi's dead. It picked up on the perfect cliffhanger. So the premise was so, like, man, you just had to find out what was going on in the story of Tekken 5. You just had to find out what was going on. So Tekken 5 happens. Jin ended up killing Jinpachi. So you're like, oh man, I want to see what's going to happen here. Now I need to know. So we're talking about the start of a very dramatic story thread that has a nice premise set up for us every time. That has to do with like interpersonal relationships. But we're gonna get there. Okay? We're gonna get there, and I think Tekken 6 is gonna help us with where we're getting with the issues of Tekken 8. So Tekken 6, we see, okay, of course Jinpachi did have to get killed. I mean, Jinpachi, he was like an evil spirit. At this point, Jinpachi wasn't even him. But and despite us learning about the backstory of Jinpachi and Kazuya, they didn't really have a moment. Kazuya was actually mostly absent during the 5th tournament. So Tekken 6, what does Jin do once he gets the Zaibatsu? He goes on even worse tear. He goes on an even worse tear than Kazuya did during Tekken 2. Because Kazuya was doing like a bunch of mafioso underground, dirtbag stuff. Kind of the same types of things that he learned from his dad. Because, I mean, like, that's his dad. Jin just decides, because mind you, Jin and Kazuya, they don't have a relationship. Jin decides to start World War III because of ancient devil magic. And he wants to commit suicide, basically. So he starts a war with his dad, resulting in millions and millions of lives lost, and all for the sake of trying to commit suicide. During the whole time, Heihachi has this other kid that's trying to like stop him. He ends up not. So like nothing really happens in 6 actually. So Jin tries to commit suicide. He fails. Lars tries to stop him. That doesn't really, he doesn't help or do anything in regards to that. And at the end of it all, Heihachi just like takes over the Zaibatsu, and we return to the status quo from Tekken 3, basically, because that was the last time. Or was it 4? Yeah, 4 Heihachi had the Zaibatsu. Because even though like Jin won the tournament, he took off. So it's basically Tekken 4 kind of all over again, story wise. So 6, we had a good premise because we wanted to see what was going to happen here. We wanted to see what was going to happen. It's just that what happened in the story was like nonsense, and it made Jin like irredeemable. He had no reason to be fighting with his dad. They didn't have an abusive relationship. It was all for like selfish purposes. So it's like, okay, well, I guess this just kind of establishes Jin as like a crazy person who is like very selfish and self-centered and megalomaniacal. So, all right, well, I guess that's kind of where we're at with Jin. So we got some character development for him. He's trash. All right, so cool. We know Jin is trash. And there's at least one other Mishima guy, kid, child, or whatever, who's a decent person, which is Lars. Even though Lars ended up not really being all that useful, at least we know he's a chill person. So at least between Lars and the adopted one, Lee, Mishima had a couple parenting W's. Or Heihachi Mishima did. So we get to 7. 7, this is the fade we've been waiting to see get ran for the whole time. Because Jin dying creates a power vacuum. Heihachi comes back. So because Heihachi comes back, Kazuya knows where he's at. So Kazuya, now that Kazuya knows where to find him, he doesn't have Jin in his way. He's getting ready to run the fade that he's been wanting to run ever since all the way back here. Which he's ready to finish it for good now. So the premise is that it's banging. It's bringing it all full circle. It's still based on all of this. All this trauma, all this drama, all this back and forth, right? This is looking to wrap it up, and that's basically what happens. Is that, Kazuya gets to run his fade and he ends it. Unless they do some garbage and Heihachi ends up coming back somehow, some way. I doubt it. But that's like, okay, satisfying conclusion, and now he's again ready to go back into part 2 of his villain arc, except why it's so much more amplified this time, we don't really know. We don't really know why last time he beat Heihachi and thought he killed him, he just decided to be a gangster, and why this time we had to go to Tekken 8 and he's on some, it's hard to even say supervillain crap, because the premise, right, what we got from the story preview is that basically he implemented worldwide gun control, which, hey, and got rid of like GPS missile tracking and all that stuff. So like, hey man, that's like the progressive dream. But I'm not gonna like try and cape for that too much, because I mean, hey, if Kazuya's got to get his, he's got to get his. But the problem, right, is where we get to the premise of Tekken 8 and why it's an issue. Now, I'll say what I think the solution could be in the story, which I've thought the solution needs to be between these two the whole time, is this whole idea that Jin can be redeemed, or that he should be redeemed, or that he should be like the hero just based off the fact that he's willing to fight Kazuya. Like, being willing to fight, like, there's no world that you're going to be in where you don't sympathize for Kazuya. Kazuya as a character is more sympathetic than Anakin Skywalker, right? Anakin Skywalker had every privilege and opportunity to not have to be who he was, and ended up being who he was anyway, more or less for plot reasons. He had people that had his back. He had the highest levels of privilege and training, and a group of people all around him. Kazuya has literally been abused and alone his whole life. So, like, actively abused and stepped on and jobbed, right? Beat on by his dad, trying to get revenge for that. Still, you know what I mean? Like, the only person who was ever nice to him was June, and she was nice to him long enough for him to get a nut. Like, they basically were in and out of each other's lives during like a little lusty moment in this tournament, and that's how Jin got here to begin with. So like, he's never had anyone around him who's like nice or loving. Jin, on the other hand, is the exact opposite, right? Like, he's got a loving relationship with Lee and Lars and Xiao Yu and his mom, and his dad is like sure, they've scrapped it out, but realistically, them scrapping it out has been like initiated by Jin half the time. So like, their fights is not even on the same like type of level. So like, I don't see how they redeem Jin. I don't see how they redeem Jin, and they redeem him enough to like make it justified to where like he's that much better than Kazuya, and he needs to be the superhero. Like, this whole presentation of Tekken 8 is that like Jin is this superhero and he needs to overcome his darkness so that way he could fight like the really, really, really dark individual. Like, I don't get where he's that much better, or like, even if he did turn over a new leaf, where he could like really morally posture to Kazuya that much. I don't understand. I don't see that. So I guess the only way that, so the premise is weak. The premise is very weak, which we haven't really had a Tekken with a weak premise. But we could have a strong resolution. The strong resolution is we need Return of the Jedi. Right? We need them to hug it out. If Jin is going to turn over his new leaf or whatever, he can't turn over the new leaf and then get to kill Kazuya and be like, I'm getting revenge, or I'm protecting everybody because blah blah blah. I mean, I guess if Kazuya needs to be killed, then he needs to be killed in order for the world not to be ended, but he's not really looking to end the world. He's looking to like, he's more or less literally the premise is that he's looking to institute mass gun control, which I'm not going to say is like, I'm not going to get political and say that's good or bad or whatever. I'm just going to say that that's like kind of, is he murderous and is he a gangster? Yes. So I'm not going to say that Kazuya is like this pure, perfect good person, but he, for the entirety of the saga, has been the pro tag, except for, you can maybe say that, well, Tekken 3 he wasn't even there, so he wasn't the pro tag. And He wasn't the pro tag in Tekken 2, although Tekken 2 was just very interesting, right? They did this so well, as far as the levels of intrigue. I'm just gonna say that they're told there it's a very thin line. It's a very thin line that they're walking here when it comes to what they do with the story. So I guess as of today, the 26th, a lot of people are going to find out what exactly they do with the story and how it lands. Right now, it's starting off very weak from the Tekken fan perspective. And me, I don't see how they're really justifying this. Like, if they wanted to actually continue the story thread with Lars and be like, "Hey, Lars has Lars would be the guy," but then they're already introducing another kid, so I don't expect them to really to like tie up any of those Heihachi other kids story threads too much. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. So if anyone wants to add to the discussion, just go ahead and dip down in my comments, and we'll chop it up. But that's all I got to say for now. Y'all go ahead and have a good one, and peace.